Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final, but not least event of this conference honoring Wang Zheng. We have spent the last 2 days celebrating the life and career and contributions of an amazing individual. And even though she is retiring, I think this is just the beginning of a new chapter of mentorship and activism. And through this conference, we have been able to celebrate old friendships and also make new relationships. And I am so grateful that I could be part of the organizing committee along with Emily Wilcox and Joshua Hubbard and Charlie E. Jong, along with the staff of the Women's and Gender Studies Department and the Lieberthal Rogel Center for Chinese Studies, who made this all happen. We are so grateful that we could share this time together. And now I will get out of the way because we are all, I know, eager to hear even more from Wang Zheng.
Thank you, Yili. First, to all the participants from various parts of the world, let me say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you for your participation in this conference. I know some of you, it may be very late, maybe your sleeping time. If you still hang there, I truly appreciate your patience and your efforts. Next, I would like to thank the Women's and Gender Studies Department and the Lieberthal Rogel Center for Chinese Studies at the University of Michigan for their co-hosting the event. Not just their support for this event, although also I want to thank you using this opportunity to thank both units for their long support for my efforts in promoting Chinese feminism. I received numerous financial support, internal grants from ERA CCS for my feminist activism, actually. So I just want to make an open announcement, to make it public knowledge for everybody participating here to know that my past efforts, and if you say any accomplishments, cannot be materialized without the support of the institutional help. So I just want to use this opportunity to say this thank you. And I would like to thank our former director of the CCS, Mary Gallagher. I'm not sure if she's still here. During her long role as the as a director of our center, she really supported me, supported my efforts 100%. So, and for this event in particular, I thank my former colleague, Professor Emily Wilcox, for initiating this event and also for submitting the proposal originally to ERA CCS, and for continuing her service on the conference organizing committee, even after her departure from UN. Each member of the committee, that also includes Josh and Charlie, under the strong leadership of Professor Yili Wu, deserves my heartfelt thanks for your tremendous efforts over the past several months, which brought some of my former and current students together for this occasion that showcases their academic accomplishments. Yili at the beginning yesterday, in her announcement, explained that for a lot of concerns, various concerns for this conference, we only invited students at UN or in North America to join this, join different panels, even though majority of my students are situated in China, in Chinese higher educations in different positions. But for understandable reasons, they are not invited, but doesn't mean they are excluded. And also know a lot of them have been following this event on Zoom. And I just want you to know that I'm thinking of you at this moment. As a teacher, nothing can be more gratifying than witnessing intellectual growth of my students while fully recognizing that I only played a tiny role in the complicated process of their academic development. I'm not claiming any credits, but only expressing my joy and peace of mind enabled by the knowledge that young scholars have been and will be producing excellent feminist scholarship, far exceeding what I was able to imagine when I started my work in the field. Thank you, all the presenters. I wish I could give each of you a big hug to congratulate you on your accomplishments. Someday we'll do that, okay? To my colleagues at University of Michigan who have served as panel discussants, I truly appreciate your kind generosity and your warm support of the event. As you have been doing that in the past, everyone who joined this event has been enthusiastic support of my feminist pursuit in China, not only as a colleague here teaching or doing research or working on my scholarship here at UM, but also strong support of my feminist pursuit. I truly appreciate every one of you, all these years of strong support. Without this supporting network, I won't be able to do a lot of things I wanted to do. So I promise that once the pandemic is over, I will host a thank you banquet for my UM colleagues and for if by that time, my current students are still hanging around, you'll all be invited with a significantly expanded menu from Wang's kitchen and unintended positive consequences of my life in the pandemic. Since some of my students boast about my cooking. So I think that's a way, and a very Chinese way to express gratitude, appreciation, and love. I save my final gratitude to my dear friend Gail. She had a schedule conflict, so she is not able to join us right now, but that's why we are recording. I hope she will hear my comment here. Our friendship began when I was a graduate student and when Gail was already a noted historian in the field with many publications. Knowing how well she knew me, I was still overwhelmed by how much loving care and intellectual thoughtfulness she put into the keynote speech yesterday. Actually, I received some WeChat messages from young scholars in China, elsewhere. They were following this event, and they told me that they were weeping, so touched when they heard Gail's keynote speech, and when they observed our communications, our discussions, at this feminist event. Okay, so it's really wonderful. Gail's keynote speech is a masterpiece that weaves the personal, the political, and the intellectual together coherently and seamlessly in the historical narrative with the primary source materials she collected. You can tell that I'm not simply touched by an old friend's expression of her deep understanding of my pursuits. I'm actually in awe of an outstanding historian's masterful skills in constructing historical narratives with depth, with both analytical depth and artistic beauty. Gail left me with some large shoes to fill, which I cannot live up to. Actually, originally I thought I would just use this opportunity to say thank you, to express my deep gratitude to everybody who puts in effort to organize and to participate. But then when I noticed that a lot of people not in this small circle also joining in this event. And I thought, oh, maybe people want to hear something other than my thank you notes. But you could tell that I didn't prepare for a fabulous presentation like everyone else did throughout the past 2 days, the conferences. So please lower your expectations. I would just like to use the opportunity to share with you some thoughts over the issues concerning me most at the moment. And I'll try to be brief. And I hope after my brief comments, and I hope leave some space for further discussions, you can raise questions to me, or I can invite all the other panelists or discussants to join in for further discussion. If you can still have the energy and the patience to hang there. Almost 2 decades ago, I was recruited to UN to fulfill feminist scholars' vision and the women's studies agenda at the time, that is to integrate area studies scholars into women's studies in order to globalize women's studies. Because up to that point, the curriculum was mostly US centered. Now, 2 decades later, the integration of the Chinese studies and gender studies has acquired a different meaning to me as the result of drastically changed geopolitical dynamics. 2 decades ago, I could be easily categorized as a third world woman who studied women and gender in a third world country. Today, although the Chinese premier has recently revealed that 600 million Chinese make less than 1,000 yuan per month on average, the masculinist ruling clique has nonetheless been articulating and implementing its vision and plans of global dominance. The rise of a despotic Chinese emperor of the 21st century who dreams of restoring ancient Chinese dynastic glories is not an isolated growth simply out of the Chinese soil, but a phenomenon made possible by over 3 decades of deeply intertwined entanglement of transnational corporations' power of capital and technology, the political power of involved multiple nation states, and discursive power sustained by both capital and state machineries. Although in Chinese studies, some critical-minded scholars have paid close attention to the CCP's neo-colonial expansion early on, the entangled global processes that have brought forth an aspiring hegemonic power has far from being adequately studied in academic fields that have been confined by conceptual frameworks reflecting intellectual concerns of the 20th century's historical processes. The rapidly changed geopolitical dynamics has rendered some concepts situated in the 20th century obsolete or losing their analytical utilities, to say the least. But some of those concepts are still widely circulating. For instance, an easy deployment of the term Cold War is widely circulating even among academics, though the imagery of two discrete camps isolated from each other cannot be further away from today's reality of the web of global entanglement of powers. The Cold War paradigm invokes in the minds of the conservatives in the US an imperative of good versus evil, which whitewashes massive collaboration and complicity of the transnational corporations, politicians, media personnel, academics, scientists, and even entertainment industry in the US and other Western countries in building up the muscles of current Chinese masculinist despotism. The processes of this global entanglement, saturated in blood and sweat of the exploited, the dispossessed, the voiceless, the marginalized, and the untamed, as well as the effects of the entanglement of global powers on the world, need to be investigated so as to prevent any involved and implicated party from claiming moral high ground or fanning up nationalism, to say the least. A clear delineation of the global structures and mechanisms that have operated through various nodal points in the transnational power matrix could be the first step towards the goal of dismantling it. Our deeply troubled time demands new conceptualization to help refocus and readjust our critical lenses and to dislodge the inward-looking orientation in much of the US academic fields, let alone the general public. The feminist vision of integrating area studies into women's studies in order to decenter the US in feminist knowledge production ought to be extended to all fields with some modification. Globalizing knowledge production in a way quite similar to the feminist agenda of engendering knowledge production is not simply adding women from various parts to the picture. Rather, it requires a departure from our older ways of conceptualizing the world. No one in today's world can be free from the effects of the power of the global matrix, as the ongoing pandemic vividly proves. Our embeddedness in the web of transnational power or powers that is not accountable to any citizens situated in any national boundaries or political systems needs to be brought to the conscious level in order to break the national boundaries in our conceptualization. For scholars in Chinese fields, Chinese studies, especially for scholars from the PRC, the overlapping locations in which we are situated provide necessary material conditions for new knowledge production at this critical historical juncture. Some of you have already engaged in producing cutting-edge scholarship in transnational contexts, as we have watched Yan's work on the AIDS movement and Jillian's work on the feminist movement, and actually Charlie Zhang's work he just briefly mentioned. I think the book is going to be out soon with Duke Press. His work actually look at neoliberalism and using affect, the panel's theme, you know, we just touched upon, use affect as an analytical lens to look at the global circulation of neoliberalism. All these works pay close attention to the nodal points through which resources and power got circulated or distributed transnationally, and their effects on various locations and scenarios in China. I think the conceptual framework can also be productively applied to the examination of the global power matrix, though not necessarily with China as the receiving end of global power dynamics. I enjoyed David's comment, you know, on Lian Su's paper and how this kind of research, ecofeminism in China can have some impact on gender studies beyond the China field, you know. I enjoy this kind of way of thinking. I think it's very important at this moment. You know, we need to think beyond the national boundaries, okay? In other words, I think it is important to critically scrutinize various power players' roles in creating the global mess without being constrained by national boundaries. Here, I mean both perpetrators and investigators, okay? Since the perpetrators are not confined by national boundaries, the investigators shouldn't either. I'm fully aware of the risk to push political boundaries set by the CCP as citizens of the PRC, and to break intellectual constraints in our academic setting here as junior scholars. Today in the US, there is even the risk of being labeled as China bashing if you raise critical voices against the CCP, a manifestation of the persistent hold of the Cold War paradigm among some in the left who would like to defend the CCP as the leader of a socialist country or of a third world anti-imperialist force in their committed struggles against the US imperialism and US capitalism. Besides reflecting the misguided romanticizing and naivety about today's CCP, unfortunately, they still kept the label of CCP, okay? In Chinese, we have a saying, 挂羊头卖狗肉. Okay, you are selling the stuff that does not match your brand name, or your logo, or the sign of your shop, okay? So besides reflecting the misguided romanticizing and naivety about today's CCP, the conflation of a ruling political party with a country and a people can actually be a sign of political manipulation. In any case, such conflation is detrimental to the Chinese in this country, especially at the moment when the tensions between the two world powers are building up, and when the cases of violence against Asians are increasing. Even just for the sake of our self-interest, Chinese scholars in the US ought to make tremendous efforts to deconstruct the conflation and to engage in activities to inform the uninformed, which is a lot, okay? Now, how do gender studies and feminist activism figure in our broad concerns of finding ways to resist the transnational power matrix? I think gender studies can offer a range of analytical toolkits to dissect the formation of the global masculinist power center in general, and to explicate, in particular, the triumph of Chinese hegemonic masculinity today, shaped by deeply ingrained patriarchal hierarchical values and social norms, commingling with social Darwinism and nationalism in recent years. I'm afraid that the mouth for a long sentence may lose my audience. Let me switch to the vernacular. Okay, let me put it very blankly or bluntly. I think it's urgent for Chinese feminists all over the world to help China stop reproducing emperors. To prepare for that end, we need to start a feminist-led new culture movement aiming at male transformation and creating new masculinity. Shen Rui just at the noontime already revealed some of my new agenda, current preoccupation, okay? A central goal when Chengdu Xiu started the new culture movement, he was disgusted by Yuan Shikai, president of the new Republic of China, after the collapse of the Qing dynasty and wanted to be the emperor, right? So he was so disgusted and he started a new culture movement. He condemned feudal despotism and patriarchy despotism, okay? And vowed to transform the Chinese mindset with his journal, New Youth, in order to move ancient Chinese society into a modern society. By the way, there's a very interesting TV series right now going on. It's called Awakening Times. I highly recommend 觉醒年代. I highly recommend everyone to watch that one. That one was made to celebrate the centennial anniversary of the CCP, founding of the CCP. So they focused on Chengdu Xiu, these early founders of the new culture movement, and also the Communist Party. Curiously, such a modernizing project only brought forth generations of new women, but not that many new men. A century later, we can see clearly that Chinese modernization is fundamentally the modernization of women who have transformed the social landscapes by stepping out of domestic confinement and occupying public space, meanwhile shaping their new subjectivities, demanding equality, independence, and human dignity. While men with class and gender privileges who consume all modern technology offers have continued their emperor's dreams that is constituted of possession of power, money, and lots of women. 三宫六院72妃, right? We know that's the number you calculate. How many concubines the emperor could enjoy, right? As numerous cases of fallen officials in the past decades, right, have testified to the predominant pattern. Such toxic masculinity prepares fertile soil for the reproduction of feudal despotism, to use Chengdu Xiu's parlance, to convey an archaic image of a Chinese emperor appearing in the 21st century. That's his usage, okay? A century ago. The urgency of male transformation is not only to lay the foundational work in order to eventually stop reproducing emperors. It is also a measure to reduce the oppressive gender gap. In today's China, the salient gender gap is not just manifested in income, but more seriously, is in the gendered subjectivities. The increasing gap in gendered subjectivities has resulted in the intensification of gender antagonism, especially in the 21st century, when socialist egalitarian ideologies and practices have long been abandoned. China has turned into a blatantly male-dominated, sexist, and misogynist society, just as a large cohort of educated only daughters have entered the workplace with high expectations of their career development. To their dismay and deep frustration, at each turn, they would likely find themselves trapped by some man with some kind of power. In recent years, young women's brave anti-sexual harassment struggles are only one of the manifestations of gender revolt against male sexual coercion and exploitation. Under the political circumstances, promoting male transformation can only be a discursive maneuver to start with, though. Shen Rui at noon shouted out a slogan. Originally, I didn't want to put it in my remarks, but since she already let the cat out the bag, I might as well.
I'm here.
Yeah, I might as well to say that I think only socialism can save China. Not only socialism, that's the Communist Party's slogan right now. Our slogan now, what I propose is that only feminism can save China. The reasons are what I explained to you above. So I don't think it's a fantasy to create new men of the 21st century. As we have seen, more and more young men showing great interest in feminism, and some are openly identified with feminism, as you can observe, at this event, this conference. Very understandably, many young men are also deeply oppressed by the Chinese hegemonic masculinity that is inherently class-based and enforcing heterosexual normativity as well. So there are tremendous amount of young men who are so frustrated, okay? And sometimes these resource-poor young men, even highly educated nowadays, even graduate students, sometimes they have to find jobs in package delivery industry. And with the solidification of class in today's China, there's a lot of very frustrated young men, especially under the pressure of this hegemonic masculinity model in China nowadays. So I think the appeal of feminism to this social group is also very, very strong. To conclude, because China's rapid ascending as a global power, it is more urgent than ever to develop feminist activism in various forms, including producing engaged scholarship to extend feminist critical discourse. Despite, or rather, exactly because of the current surveillance and suppression of a repressive regime, I'm fully confident with the future development of Chinese feminism, because I just want to present to you some numbers. In the May 4th period, 1919, when the May 4th movement began, at the same time, a second feminist wave in Chinese history also emerged, high tide emerged after the May 4th students' activism. And that May 4th feminism is the theme of my dissertation turning to the book, first English monograph. It left enduring impact on modern China, okay? But if we want to, if we think about exact numbers of educated women, feminists at the time, by definition, they're all educated in a largely illiterate country, 90% even. 1949, still 90% of Chinese women were illiterate. So 1919, women were able to attend secondary education normally. Usually it's women's normal schools, a very small minorities, very small percentage. And besides colleges, women's colleges run by Christian churches, the public universities, Chinese-run universities, did not open to women students until I think 1920, in the high tide of May 4th feminism. So I would estimate, even though there was no statistics to say how many feminist organizations, how many activists, to say the most, I would say those activists will not be more than tens of thousands, okay? But they made a strong impact in Chinese history. In 2012, female students' college enrollment, okay? The college enrollment, the female students, the percentage of female students already exceeded to 51%. So now it's not exaggerating to say that we have the largest cohort of highly educated women in Chinese history. Unprecedented number, okay? Never seen before. And exactly because of this hostile environment, hostile sexist environment to these young women discovered or find themselves in, you could imagine the tension, the antagonism, the frustrations, the angers, okay, all build up, okay. One statistic I'm sure I can tell you, that is in 2016, even after the Feminist Five, the detention of the Feminist Five that signaled the states, the police side, the national security side decided to move on against the feminist activists. But in 2016, when a feminist organization started an online activity, online event to celebrate International Women's Day, to resist the commercialized Women's Day in China. That's March the 7th. They had a commercialized day, selling all those commodities. So the feminists started an event calling for recognition and the celebration of the International Women's Day. 100 million hits, okay? The website received 100 million hits. I will not say all of them are conscious feminists, but that signaled strong interest, concerns over gender issues. And I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that young women, not only educated women, or college educated women, or other secondary education women, and the migrant female workers who created the world's sweatshop, right? Or who provided the cheapest labor for the world sweatshop, famous was sweatshop in China, especially in electronic industries and the garment industries. I would think among these various group of young women, I would say those interested in feminist issues should be in the tens of millions, at least, to say the least, if I do not use that 100 million hits to that website, right? So that's a picture for you. 100 years ago, you started with maybe tens and thousands of female students, newly rising social category in modern China. And now, a century later, we have such huge amount of brilliant young women. And most of them are in the cohort of only child, okay? You can imagine what does only child means. Their socialization is entirely different from previous generations of women born into multiple siblings, families, okay? The resources, the gender, the socialization, everything's different. Okay, so that's why I'm very, very confident of about the development of feminism in China. And also, yes, I want to reiterate, only feminism can save China. Okay, thank you. I will leave with these brief remarks, and I would like to hear your questions and see if we want to have further discussions on this note.
Thank you very much, Wang Zheng. Yes, I hear applauding. Those inspiring and rousing remarks, I think we will all take with us in the days and weeks and years ahead as we build the new reality that the pandemic and the changes in the world have wrought upon us. I will now pause the recording. And then I think if people want to stay and ask questions, that we can stay and do that. But I will now formally thank everybody for coming to this conference, and to Wang Zheng for her inspiring career and inspiring message to us all. So thank you very much.